Fort St. Charles on Lake of the Woods was the second post built by Le Vérendrye during his expansion of trade and exploration west of Lake Superior. It was located on Magnusens Island on the northwest angle of Minnesota, 3.5 miles east of Angle Inlet, Minnesota, and 1 mile southwest of Penasse, Minnesota, the most northerly point in that state. The site of the modern Reconstruction may be somewhat different since the lake levels were raised by control structures on the Winnipeg River. For related forts, see Winnipeg River. Le Vérendrye reached the north shore of Lake Superior in late 1731 and sent men ahead to build Fort St. on Rainy Lake. In July or August 1732 he, his eldest son Jean-Baptiste de La Vérendrye, his nephew Christopher de Frost de la Jemeraye, father Charles Michel Messiger, and 50 canoes of Indians left Fort St-Pierre and built Fort St. Charles on Lake of the Woods. The fort was 60 by 100 feet with 2 gates and a double row of 15-foot palisades and 4 bastions and a watchtower. The internal buildings were roofed with bark. There was abundant fishing, hunting, and wild rice, an important matter since it was difficult to haul food from Montreal à Fort Michilimackinac. Next spring he sent Jean-Baptiste and La Jemeraye down the Winnipeg. They got to within 15 or 20 leagues of the lake when they were blocked by ice. The English on Hudson Bay reported increased activity of coureurs des bois west of the fort, but Le Vérendrye said nothing about them in his reports. On the 1st of January 1734 a group of Assiniboines reached the fort and brought the Europeans the first news of the Mandans. Sometime after this 2 of his men returned from Lake Winnipeg and the first Fort Maurepas was built soon after. In 1735 La Jemeraye's men returned to the lake from the Red River of the North via the Roseau River, Portage de la Savane and Reed River. On June 6, 1736 an expedition departed from Fort St. Charles, consisting of Jean-Baptiste de La Vérendrye with the Jesuit missionary priest Father Jean-Pierre Aulneau and 19 French-Canadian voyagers. They were headed for Fort Michilimackinac. They had traveled only a few kilometers from the fort when they were attacked by Sioux, who killed everyone in the party. The Sioux were retaliating against La Vérendrye pair, whom they believed was trading guns to the traditional enemies, the Cree and Assiniboine. The expedition members were killed on a small island, called Massacre Island, Ontario. However, historians have not been unable to reach consensus on its exact identity. After the massacre was discovered, Le Vérendrye pair directed that the bodies of his son and the priests, and the heads of the 19 voyagers, be brought back for burial at Fort St. Charles. The remains of his son and the priest were buried under the altar stone of the chapel, and the voyagers were buried outside. The fort was abandoned in 1749. Reconstruction. Long after the fort had been abandoned and disappeared, newly discovered historic documents helped people find its location. In 1890 Father Aulneau's letters sent to family in Vérendrye, France, were discovered. They were translated and published in 1893 by S. Jones, S.J., archivist of St. Mary's College in Montreal, as the Aulneau collection. They contributed to the work of Reuben Goldthwaite on compilation and publication of the Jesuit relations, the accounts of missionary Jesuits in New France. Academics at St. Boniface College in Winnipeg read the Aulneau collection, which inspired a number of expeditions to discover the old sites. By 1908 the old fort location and probable location of Massacre Island had been established. In 1911 L.A. Prudhomme recounted the conclusions of such expeditions in the Bulletin of the Historical Society of St. Boniface. In 1912 a Jesuit team excavated at the site of the fort, where they identified remains as those of Le Vérendrye and Aulneau of the 1736 expedition by artifacts. objects, including Allnose rosary and the hook to his cassock, buried with him under the altar. To celebrate the golden anniversary of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, Indiana, Minnesota, they and co-religionists in Manitoba raised funds to buy the property of the fort and reconstruct it, including a shrine to Fr. Allno. Begun in 1949, they completed the project in 1950. The fort is situated on Magnusens Island, at the site of the old fort, at the mouth of Angle Inlet. Local N.W. Angle pioneer residents were instrumental in the reconstruction of Fort St. Charles. They provided invaluable machinery and knowledge of the area, and without their assistance the Knights of Columbus would have fallen on hard times in their quest for the restoration.